Man of Steel takes inspiration from the Dark Knight trilogy in a lot of ways. I mean, Christopher Nolan produced it, there was likely going to be a little overlap. Much like that trilogy, it's a more grounded and gritty approach to Superman as a franchise than many other versions. And also like The Dark Knight, it takes a bit of an unconventional approach with its title. Unlike most superhero movies, which will generally be named after the character or team for that sweet, sweet brand recognition, and maybe followed up with a subtitle if it's a sequel, or just if they feel like it, I guess. The Dark Knight instead went by one of Batman's own titles, and then a few years later, Man of Steel did the same. Now, I like Man of Steel, but I think it's not controversial to say that compared to something like The Dark Knight, it's not quite as good, and the title is no exception to that. Jesus Christ, this is my 4th video talking about Zack Snyder, who I am genuinely a fan of, and even when it's on a movie I like, I still can't find anything nice to say about him. Aren't Zack Snyder fans meant to be like fanatical worshippers of this guy? Why can't I be like that? Okay, maybe it's for the best. But anyway, let's take a look and see why something as so seemingly trivial as a title is something that works so well in one case, but not so much in another. Well, let's take a look at the significance in The Dark Knight. A huge component of the film is the battle that will define Gotham. You've got the mob fighting to maintain power over the people, businesses, and law enforcement of the city. You've got the Joker, whose ultimate goal is to make Gotham as crazy and destructive as himself.
This is my city.
You've got Batman attempting to create peace and hope in Gotham, even if the city at large has mixed feelings about his methods.
How could you want to raise children in a city like this?
Well, I was raised here. I turned out okay.
I'm talking about the kind of city that idolizes a masked vigilante.
And you've got Harvey Dent, Gotham's district attorney, who's a desperately needed force for uncompromised good, potentially rendering Batman no longer necessary.
Well, you don't have to sell me, Dent. We all know you're Gotham's White Knight.
Throughout the movie, the protagonists are all trying to put the mob and the Joker away so that Harvey can take his role as Gotham's hero and role model going forward. But that's not exactly how things play out. The Joker, and to an extent the mob, managed to take away Harvey's faith in the world by taking away the one person that made that world worthwhile to him. And with Rachel gone, Harvey goes on a rampage, killing everyone who played a role in her death, completely apathetic to how this will affect Gotham. For all intents and purposes, the Joker won. And with the battle for Gotham essentially lost, Batman plays the game the only way he ever has. He cheats.
I killed those people. That's what I can be.
No, you can't. You're not.
I'm whatever Gotham needs me to be.
Batman has always been a rule breaker. In Batman Begins, he brought Gotham back from the brink of total corruption by fighting the bad guys in ways that the good guys couldn't.
Cops only go there when they're in force.
Do I look like a cop?
Now in the sequel, his final act to save Gotham is to straight up lie to the entire world to achieve the outcome they need. He helps Harvey Dent to maintain his role as Gotham's White Knight, even when Dent himself couldn't, and takes on his own role that isn't meant to be looked up to, but still just as important.
The Dark Knight.
While I'm on the topic of superhero movies with alternate titles, another film I'd like to touch on is Logan. Unlike The Dark Knight, Logan's title never explicitly comes up as a plot point, and Man of Steel obviously isn't taking inspiration from it given that Logan came out 4 years later. However, it does do a good job of establishing what kind of movie you're going to be watching. The previous Wolverine spin-offs in the X-Men film series were pretty straightforward in their titles because whether you like them or not, they were roughly what you'd expect from a story about the Wolverine. Big explosive adventures, crazy mutants with larger-than-life powers, giant robots and machines, and a formidable Wolverine laying waste to anything that stands in his way. Then you see the title of the third movie. No fancy superhero name, it's just Logan, which sets the tone for what to expect from this film. A much more stripped back and human story of a man past his prime struggling to maintain a purpose in a world that is similarly not what it once was.
There are no new mutants, understand? Hasn't been a new one born in 25 years.
So with all that in mind, what was Man of Steel's reasoning for being titled the way it was? Well, just to make sure I wasn't making assumptions, I found a quote from the film's screenwriter, David S. Goyer, in an interview with Empire. "We want a line of demarcation in the sand between the old and the new. Man of Steel was also supposed to represent our take, which was he's a man, but he's not made of flesh and blood." Okay, well, let's be fair and examine that line of logic. Steelman it, I guess you could say. Starting with that first comment about making a distinction between the old and the new. The movie itself is a pretty significant tonal departure from the more light-hearted Superman movies that came before it, so much so that it's arguably the main reason the film is as divisive as it is. It could be said that a change in title could be an effective way of getting that point across. But if you're gonna pick a title that implies that you're doing something different, maybe pick something that doesn't mean basically the same thing as what you're changing it from. Think about it. He's a Superman partly because he's strong and durable, and he's a Man of Steel again because he's strong and durable. Also, random thought, but if the point was to create a title that establishes that the franchise is doing something new, did it never occur to you that one of Superman's nicknames is literally the Man of Tomorrow? Hell, with all the talk in the movie about Superman being a symbol that the human race can follow for a brighter future, calling it Man of Tomorrow could actually tie into the themes of the story.
We will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards.
Or if you're going for a title that captures the more somber tone of the film, then you could call it The Last Son of Krypton. You wouldn't even need to lose that much of the marketability. People know what Krypton is and who's from there. And regarding Goyer's second point about how Superman is a man but he's not flesh and blood, again, calling it Man of Steel is just a superficial difference. Like, calling the film Superman would convey very similar information. He's a man, but he's super. The annoying thing is that if they did want to call this Man of Steel, there was an opportunity to incorporate that into the plot. Like I said, a big point of Man of Steel's story is about Clark Kent having to face the idea that one day the world may need him and he'll have the responsibility to make people realize the compassion that humanity is capable of.
You're gonna have to make a choice. A choice of whether to stand proud in front of the human race or not.
Throughout the early portions of the movie, we see some foreshadowing for that, with Clark helping out here and there, but never letting the world at large know that he exists, leaving only quiet rumors in his wake.
For some, he was a guardian angel.
Yeah.
For others, a cipher, a ghost who never quite fit in.
Imagine if the film's first act showed Clark as sort of a semi-well-known urban legend that people around the world claim to have witnessed. They see him withstand physical harm that would kill any normal person and lift things that, by all logic, should crush him. And the common name that people have given for this supposed person, the Man of Steel. Then, as Clark reveals himself to the world and people see that his strength and durability are just a couple of his many abilities, along with what looks like the S on his chest, the world at large settles on the name Superman. This would be a case in which the title Man of Steel would actually have some deeper meaning within the story, implying that the focus is on Clark learning who and what he is and eventually growing into the Superman that we all know him as. Instead, what we actually get is a movie that is taking inspiration from one of the best movies in that genre and taking a somewhat unique element from it, but without understanding what made that element work in the first place. You think you're smart, huh? Movie titles used to believe in things. Themes. Narrative cohesion. Look at you. What do you believe in, huh? What do you believe in? I might make that the take. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters Heather Reed, Zelda, Radio Peo, Moon Goddesses, Will, Blueberry Cello, and Seth M. Thank you so much for the support. If you'd like to see your name in the credits, along with early access to scripts and videos, as well as exclusive unused video thumbnails, or if you'd just like to chat with me, consider supporting me on Patreon for just $1.50 a month. The link is in the description.